The first frost of autumn had barely settled over Lake Serene when the eviction notice arrived. I recognized the envelope immediately. Thick cream-colored stock, embossed with the Silver Pines HOA insignia. Another petty fine, no doubt. Last month, it had been my unsanctioned bird feeder. The month before, the excessive wildflowers along my shoreline. But when I tore open the seal, the words inside turned my stomach to stone. Notice of violation. Eviction proceedings initiated. The letter cited 3 offences: non-compliant exterior siding, cedar shingles, prohibited under bylaw, 12.4, unauthorised fire pit, safety hazard per community standard, 7.9, failure to remit shoreline maintenance fees, outstanding balance, 4,120, 30 days to comply, or forfeit my home. I crushed the paper in my fist. This wasn't about bylaws. This was a purge. The Silver Pines Homeowners Association had spent years tightening its grip on the lake, squeezing out the last of the original owners, families like mine, who'd lived here long before. Waterfront property meant million-dollar boathouses and imported Italian fountains. My grandfather built this cabin in 1963, back when the shore was all pines and peace. Now, Marjorie Whitmore and her board of polished vultures wanted to bulldoze it for another glass-walled monstrosity. I drove straight to the HOA office, my boots kicking up gravel as I marched inside. Marjorie sat behind her desk, her silver blonde, bob immaculate, her coral-painted nails tapping against a folder labelled Violations, Callaway Lot 17. She didn't look up. "Ah, Mr. Callaway, I assume you're here about the notice. Cut the act, Marjorie." I slapped the letter onto her desk. "You know damn well my siding's been cedar for 50 years. And that fire pit? My grandfather poured the stones himself." Sighed, as if explaining arithmetic to a child. The board updated the architectural guidelines last spring. All homes must now feature, her lip curled, harmonized materials. Meaning vinyl, like your McMansions. Meaning compliant. She slid a glossy brochure toward me. Of course, if renovations are financially burdensome, Silver Pines Development would be happy to make a fair offer for your property. I nearly laughed. Fair offer. The same lie they'd used to strong-arm the O'Connells out last year, before flipping their cottage for triple the price. "You're not getting my land, Marjorie." Her smile hardened. "Then I suggest you review the bylaws. Non-compliance triggers lien authority. And liens..." She let the word hang, sharp as a guillotine. Foreclose. The air in the room thickened. She wanted me to flinch, to beg. Instead, I leaned in, close enough to smell her overpriced lavender. Perfume. "You ever wonder why my grandfather never joined your little HOA? Her eyebrow twitched. Sentimentality over sense, I assume. I held her gaze. No, because he didn't have to. For the first time, her confidence flickered. I walked out without another word, the weight of an unspoken truth burning in my chest. Somewhere in my attic, buried beneath decades of tax files and fishing licenses, was a document Marjorie Whitmore had never seen, and it changed everything. The attic smelled of aged timber and forgotten memories. Dust motes swirled in the slanted afternoon light as I heaved aside boxes of Christmas decorations and mildewed photo albums. Somewhere in this chaos lay the answer, the truth my grandfather had mentioned only once, years ago, when I was too young to understand its significance. "This land has roots deeper than those pines, boy. Never let anyone tell you otherwise." My fingers brushed against a rusted lockbox, buried beneath a moth-eaten quilt. The hinges groaned in protest as I pried it open. Inside lay a single yellowed envelope, marked in my grandfather's jagged script, "Property, do not discard." The deed inside was nearly translucent with age. Its ink faded, but still legible. My pulse quickened as I traced the boundary lines with my fingertip. The document didn't just outline my cabin's plot. It encompassed the entire western shoreline, including the HOA's prized communal dock and the access road they'd claimed as association property. A laugh escaped me, sharp and disbelieving. All these years, the HOA had been charging residents to use a dock that wasn't theirs. They'd fine me for unauthorized shoreline modifications on land they didn't own. The arrogance of it burned like whiskey in my throat, but proof alone wasn't enough. I needed leverage. The county clerk's office was all fluorescent, lights and bureaucratic sterility. The clerk, a weary-eyed woman named Linda, squinted at the deed through her bifocals. "This is unusual," she murmured, flipping through a leather-bound ledger. Most of these old lake grants were dissolved when the HOA incorporated in the 80s, but not this one. She hesitated, then pulled a microfiche tape from a drawer. The machine whirred as she scanned decades-old records. Finally, she froze. Oh. She turned the screen toward me. There it was, a single line in the county archives, overlooked or ignored for years. Parcel 17W, Shoreline and Access. Covenant exempt from HOA jurisdiction per original land grant, 1952. Linda's voice dropped to a whisper. "Do you understand what this means?" I understood perfectly. Marjorie Whitmore's bi-weekly board meeting was already in session when I arrived at the community centre. Through the glass doors, I could see her at the head of the table, flanked by her sycophants, droning on about aesthetic unity. I didn't knock. The room fell silent as I strode inside and dropped the deed and county records onto the polished mahogany. Marjorie's teacup clattered against its saucer. "Mr. Calloway, this is a private meeting." "Not on my property, it isn't." I tapped the deed, which, as it turns out, includes this building and the dock, and roughly half the land Silver Pines has been illegally taxing for the past 30 years. A board member, Carl Rigby, a retired lawyer with the moral flexibility of a weather vane, snatched up the documents. His face drained of colour as he read. Marjorie's smile was brittle. "This is absurd. If there were any validity to this claim, the association would have known," I finished. "You didn't know because my grandfather never enforced it. He didn't care about your petty rules, but I do." The room erupted. Voices overlapped. "This can't be legal. We've maintained that land for decades." Until Marjorie slammed her palm on the table. "Enough." She turned to me, her voice dripping with faux sympathy. "Even if this document is legitimate, surely we can reach an arrangement. A quiet sale, perhaps." I leaned in, close enough to watch her pupils dilate. "No, here's my arrangement. You drop the eviction. You wipe every fine you've ever levied against me and every other original owner you've bullied. And from now on, the HOA pays me rent for the dock and this building." Her porcelain composure cracked. "You're bluffing." I turned to leave, pausing at the door. "Try me. You've got 24 hours to decide before I file for back taxes and trespassing. Oh, and Marjorie," I glanced at the dock through the window, "tell your members to enjoy their last free sunset." The next 24 hours crawled by like a slow poison. I spent them methodically preparing, scanning the deed at the county recorder's office, drafting a formal notice of trespass, and most satisfying of all, having a new sign custom made. In town, by the time the sun dipped below the pines on the second day, my phone had buzzed 17 times with calls from blocked numbers. I ignored everyone. At precisely 5:01 p.m., 1 minute past my deadline, I strode down to the community dock with a cordless drill and my new sign. The lake was unnaturally still, its surface reflecting the first blush of twilight like spilled ink. From the shore, I could see curtains twitching in waterfront homes, shadowy figures watching through binoculars. The old sign, Silver Pines, HOA Private Dock, Members Only, came off with 3 sharp screws. I was halfway through mounting its replacement when Marjorie's heels clicked against the weathered planks behind me. "You're making a spectacle," she hissed. I turned, drill still whirring in my hand. Funny, I thought I was just exercising my property rights. Her usually flawless makeup was smudged beneath her eyes, and her blazer looked like she'd slept in it. The sight sent a thrill through me. The board had clearly panicked. Carl Rigby materialized at her shoulder, clutching a manila folder like a shield. "Now, son, let's not be hasty. I'm not your son." I finished securing the sign and stepped back so they could read it. "Private property, dock access, by owner permission only. Violators will be prosecuted." Marjorie's breath came in short, audible bursts. "This is extortion." "No," I said, wiping my hands on my jeans. "Extortion would be threatening to triple everyone's HOA fees unless they voted my way." Sound familiar? Carl's jowls quivered. "We're prepared to offer a settlement. The board will withdraw all violations against your property and reimburse your legal expenses." "And the back rent?" I asked mildly. "The 12 years of unauthorized use of my shoreline. The illegal construction of this dock without the landowner's consent." Marjorie's manicured fingers curled into claws. "You'll never prove." "I don't have to." I pulled an envelope from my back pocket and handed it to Carl. "The county assessor's office already did. That's a preliminary calculation of owed fees plus penalties. Comes out to about $287,000. Give or take." Carl's hands shook as he scanned the figures. When he looked up, his eyes held something I'd never seen from an HOA board member before: fear. Marjorie snatched the papers from him. "This is ludicrous. We'll tie you up in court for years." "You could," I agreed, "or you could call an emergency meeting tonight and vote to accept my terms. Because tomorrow morning." I nodded toward the water, where a barge with demolition markings loomed in the distance. "That arrives to reclaim my shoreline." The color drained from Marjorie's face. She understood. I wasn't just threatening their dock. I was threatening the very foundation of Silver Pine's property values. Carl grabbed her elbow. "We need to convene. The board." Now, as they retreated up the path, I took a seat at the end of the dock, letting my legs dangle over the water. The first stars were just beginning to pierce the twilight. Somewhere behind me, car doors slammed, and voices rose in frantic argument. I didn't turn around. Let them squirm. The emergency meeting lasted until 2:17 a.m. I knew because I sat on the porch of my cabin the entire time, sipping coffee and watching the lights blaze in the community center across the lake. Every so often, raised voices carried across the water. Marjorie's shrill protests, Carl's weary bargaining, the occasional outburst from other board members. At 2:23 a.m., headlights cut through the darkness as a car peeled out of the parking lot. 10 minutes later, my phone buzzed with an email from the HOA's legal counsel. "Silver Pines HOA motion to settle unanimously approved." I read the terms twice, then allowed myself a slow, satisfied smile. The next morning, the entire community woke to 3 surprises. First, the demolition barge had vanished overnight. Second, A new notice had been posted on every mailbox in Silver Pines, declaring all pending violations against original landowners null and void, and announcing an immediate 40% reduction in annual HOA fees. Third, Marjorie Whitmore had resigned. I waited until noon to make my appearance at the community centre. A crowd had already gathered, some residents whispering in tight clusters, others glaring at the freshly hung copy of the settlement agreement on the bulletin board. The atmosphere crackled with tension, thick enough to taste. Carl Rigby spotted me first. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. "You happy now?" he muttered. I shrugged. "I will be when the first dock rental payment clears." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Mrs. O'Connell, widowed last year after her husband's stroke, right before the HOA forced them to sell their cottage, stepped forward, her hands trembling. "Is it true?" she asked. "They can't make us leave anymore?" I met her watery gaze. "No one's taking anyone's home. Not ever again." Someone started clapping, then another. Within seconds, half the crowd was applauding. Not just the original families, but younger couples too. The ones who'd bought into Marjorie's vision of a perfect community, only to find themselves drowning in fines and restrictions. A voice cut through the noise. "This isn't over." Marjorie stood at the edge of the crowd, her designer sunglasses failing to hide the fury in her expression. She clutched at Eisen's for sale. "Sign like a weapon. You've destroyed this community," she spat. I shook my head. "No, I just reminded everyone what a community actually is." She opened her mouth to retort, then seemed to think better of it. With one last scathing look, she turned on her heel and stalked away, the sign swinging at her side. The election fair. The new HOA board was held the following month. I won by a landslide. My first act as president, tearing up the aesthetic compliance bylaws in front of a cheering crowd. My second, installing a bronze plaque on the community dock, engraved with my grandfather's favorite saying, "Land isn't owned, it's borrowed." Now, when I sit on my porch at sunset, the lake looks different, kinder. The water glimmers without pretense, the way it did when I was a boy. The new board, a mix of original owners and younger residents, meets quarterly instead of monthly, and the only violations we enforce are the ones that actually matter. No one has heard from Marjorie since she sold her house. Rumor has it she moved to a gated community in Florida. I hope they have strict bylaws.